For those who don't know me, I'm the head of the Mapra Foundation and also the artistic director. It's a foundation that supports documentary filmmaking, as well as short films, animation, and new media. The pandemic actually caused me, as a head of a foundation that supports documentary filmmaking, to actually delve back into my own roots as a filmmaker myself. I found myself one day, after having driven my daughter to the horse ranch where she had to take care of one horse specifically, under special permission, of course, I found myself walking around this big empty field and asking myself, what are we doing in terms of understanding this situation, this new situation, this local and global crisis? And it occurred to me that this is as good a moment as any to really try and find a way to translate the situation, to actually transform it in the sense of, if you film it, if you document it, if you strive to get some kind of a richer understanding of the human complexities involved in such a situation, then it is our role as a foundation to actually maybe initiate something. And this we did, actually. It began with a phone call from one producer who told me, look, I would really love to document my mother, who's over 80, and her situation of isolation. And our conversation went on to actually explore the possibility of telling the story of the elderly during this pandemic. And so after the usual short bureaucratic process, we actually allotted her development money. And then I said to myself, wait, this is such a big story. How can we try and at least, if not make a complete film immediately, but to document this human experience in our own community, in our own country? And I initiated a conversation with the producer, and I suggested to him to gather 10 documentarians, filmmakers, of both genders, of course, around the country, in different communities, different backgrounds, different cultural situations, and have them actually record, document their situation and the way that they're contending with this new reality. And this eventually became the Pandemic Logs. It's a project that's already airing on Yes Doco after really 2 months of very intense work. And it is a way that I felt another way that we need to confront the situation. When I say we need to confront, I mean, it's also very personal. Having been a filmmaker for so many years, I think we are inclined as documentarians to engage reality, maybe from a therapeutic reason, because it's some kind of therapy that we do within ourselves, vis-a-vis our characters and their situation. But it's also our responsibility, I think, to go beneath the news, the actuality, the sensationalism, and try and get into a deeper level of understanding of a situation. And this is what really inspires me, not necessarily during this pandemic, but I think with every situation that I have confronted as a filmmaker. And it also pertains to the hundreds of proposals that we read each year, is this question of how do we tell a story that is not simplistic, stereotypical, conventional? How do we reach another level of understanding which is not the obvious necessarily? A third project that we supported during these last 2 months is a documentary called Viral, and it is a film about the major hospital in Tel Aviv, Ichilov Hospital, where the crew had unlimited access to follow whatever happens in the hospital, and especially in the corona ward of the hospital. And one of the things that happened there pretty quickly was that I was shown some footage, and the footage was pretty harsh. I mean, in terms of showing doctors and nurses entering this closed ward and having at times to determine the death of someone, and you actually see it, and they put him in a body bag or her, and they seal the bag, and immediately raise the question of, okay, how much of this do we really need to understand the complexities? So it's a question about aesthetics. It's also a question about ethics. And I, from my own personal taste, I think we need to say as little as we need to, the minimum, to convey an atmosphere, an idea, a situation, a complexity. And I told the filmmakers, look, maybe you don't need all this information. Maybe it's enough that it is kind of sublime. It's more kind of hinted at rather than documented, full frontal, very directly. But having said that, I think a documentary, a good filmmaker, a good fiction or documentary is actually always longing for a crisis, because that is the essence of a dramatic story. So it doesn't necessarily pertain, the question of morality doesn't necessarily pertain only to what we're engaged in right now, but I think in every filmmaker's career, this is what he is actually searching for a crisis around which he can build a story. And a crisis naturally, a lot of times, might overflow in the visuals that it presents, and the situations that it presents, and the fragility of the characters in that situation. So I think questions of ethics and morality are always very much in our minds. And I especially think that most of the documentary filmmakers that I know and I admire are very good at creating an intimacy with their characters, where that responsibility towards them from an ethical point of view becomes even stronger, and the questions become stronger, because how much do I need to show of a kind of a desperate situation or a difficult situation in order to tell the story without compromising this person who has let me enter their lives. So these are questions. This is the topic I think that we'll be discussing here tonight. And I want to thank Pnina and Anat and Maya for this opportunity. And I'll pass the baton on to Dan Geva, who will host this panel. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Amit. It's a pleasure being here, and with us tonight are Carrie Lozano from Berkeley, USA, and Toma Heyman from Tel Aviv. And my name is Dan Geva. I've been a filmmaker, documentarian for nearly 3 decades, but in the past 10 years, I've shifted my focus to study and research and education of ethics, not because of any other reason that an early event in my career, I can say, changed my life, in the sense that I realized that things that I used to do automatically when I was young and following instructions and paradigms that I was taught in school became not so trivial to me and made me question my own way. Nonetheless, I have been making films, and I still do, even though less and less, but I meet more and more of the next generation of documentarians around the world, and with philosophy in my bag as a kind of nourishing food, I conversed with them, and I want to use the 10 or so minutes that I have in order to give you kind of a very swift introduction to the current state of affairs of both our discourse and our practical state of existence from the ethical perspective. So I think it would be fair to start by saying that in the early 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, all the way to the 80s, there are rare signs of documentarians speaking at all or being concerned about the ethical dimension of their action. One reaction is by Zigaverto, who said, when you see a comrade near you being hurt, just go on, let him bleed and go on. The next one would be by Flaherty, near-death conversation on camera, where he said, I should have been shot in the head for what I've done to the men of Aaron. And this is the first sign of guilty conscience. Something about our automatic, or if you wish, our classical practice is not so much automatic. First signs of discursive development were in the 80s in Britain, where the BBC tried to develop an ethical code. But the real transformation was in the 90s. It had nothing to do with documentary, just the shift of the world toward digital communication. And there, a figure which I think some of you, most of you know, Jay Ruby, came up with a model I want to introduce to you because I think it is a seminal model with all its problems. So what I ask you to do is imagine a square, 4 vertices. So in one corner, put the documentarian, and the opposing one, put the film, the documentary film. Go to the lower corner and put the audience. And then in the fourth one, put the institution. You can call it TV, funds, whatever, commissioning editors, it doesn't matter. We all know that since the Lumieres invented in Edison, no film was made outside of whatsoever kind of institutions. Now, imagine this square, these 4 vertices, and imagine the number of possibilities where vectors and forces kind of correspond. In Hebrew, we call it atzeret. In English, it's a factorial. So we're dealing here with factorial, in fact, 8, not 4, 8, perhaps even 10s, because all these participating players are in constant flux with one another. And even though it is a beautiful model, and I think it is a true model, because indeed, in every documentarian in the history, we have, and we will have a documentarian, film, audience, and an institution, even though this model is very problematic because it is relativistic. I mean, there's no logical point in that system that can really rule, make a decision where all the other players will say, amen, yes, this is truthful. This is something that we rely on. We just battle, and I say battle in the good sense, but we battle to the point where we're really befuddled. We are confused, and I don't mean to weaken us and say we don't know what we're doing. I'm just saying that we are taking part in probably one of the most complex systems ever to operate in human history. And the fact that we're confused is also determined by the fact that we're very susceptible to outside external noises that kind of hit us and hit all our senses. For example, there is this culture today of ethical codes. It is very much in fashion just to say, yeah, do, don't. And what are we supposed to just say, amen, just say, yes, I'll follow the code? This is one way, but this is really makes us like the people of Israel in the desert or soldiers in the army. Yes, I'll follow the code. What about independent thinking? So this culture, which enshrines the power of the highbrow academia thinking for us, is problematic. Another tendency which is problematic is the one of legalization. Everybody's legalizing and making laws, the insurance, the institutions, everybody's making laws, jumping into the lacunas, the points which weren't thought over, and just makes laws. So it seems like we live in a reality, in a society, in a culture where laws govern our existence. And that, I'm not sure it should be like that. At least they should be serving us, not governing us. Now there's another noise that really hits on our ears, and that is the local social norms. I mean, if I'm Israeli, I'm bound to the local temporary norms that govern my behavior. If I was in Argentina, in Iceland, or Nicaragua, I was bound to the norms. And the problem with norms is that they make you believe that this is like absolute. And this has always been the case, but it's not. Norms and moral norms are always right only to the time and place in which they're active. And in fact, the advancement of human race is dependent upon our capacity to break the norms. So it's very, very, if I might say, very dangerous for us to accept the social norms, and indeed we should be very critical in their face. And the fourth very loud, vociferous voice is, of course, the spirit of the time, and that is the voice of the public. That is the loud voice of opinion. Everybody has an opinion. Everybody thinks he can just tweet and say, and honestly, very few people in the world know not what a documentary is, but what it really takes to make a documentary behind the scenes, the complexity. But in this culture that we are part of, it's very much in fashion to just come out loud and say, yes, I know everything. So the culture of opinions with the norms, with the legalization and the ethical codes leaves out things we should be considering today. One is a system in which we train ourselves to deeply understand the driving, the founding concepts that guide us, that allow this complex system. Second, that we need to establish a reliable training method for a next generation on the foundations of which they will know and understand the depth and the width and of the moral sphere. And it is a sphere. It is multidimensional. And the other thing that remains out in this culture is that our practice is mostly based on getting out alive out of a horrible crisis, because crisis in every car accident has a tendency of just like hit you in the face. And this is how it works in most cases. Like you film someone, you've been following him for years, and then, oops, I don't participate. You make a film and then the commission says, no, I don't buy it, etc., etc. We know all these. Most of the time we just react to accidents. And I say that if we make a shift in the form in which we think about our moral existence, then we might be developing another generation more sophisticated than we are right now. And this is what I call a multi-perspectival documentary agent, an agent who is capable of understanding the creative force of ethics and who acts out of love and will and goodwill to face the difficulties and not out of fear. I know that fear governs our behavior because we don't want to lose the audience. We don't want to lose the commissioning editor. We don't want to lose the audience. So many times we're forced to do things that are not coming from the right place because we don't have a deep enough of a background, of deep enough a foundation to understand how otherwise we can plan or have enough of a solid ground in order not to just not run away from the danger, but really kind of get into a panic state of affairs where we just, okay, just get me out of here and next time I'll do better. And this is the point where philosophy comes into play. But here's the problem with philosophy. For most people, philosophy is theory. Philosophy is, okay, I'll do it Sunday afternoon. Just leave me alone. We're a community of doers. We're much like the Nike ad. It's just like, just do it. But this is wrong. Humans never just do it. Unless you're a blind soldier in the army, even then you're committed to think, right? But we don't just do, we think, and then we do. So philosophy has a bad name. It's like, let me do my films, and philosophy is nice for the chat. But in fact, what I propose is that the idea, and I really want to hear Toma and Carrie, what they have to say about it, is that if we want to think about the 21st century documentarian and commissioning editor and the 21st century institution and 21st century audience, which we have a part in educating that audience, we have to take into consideration solid ideas that have really outlived the battle of ideas. Because what we are we are a result of great ideas that have survived many foolish ideas that really were ejected into empty space. And we have to cherish and to get back to the roots of these great ideas and study them and act upon them and prepare a ground on the foundations of which we're not so volatile and we're not so relativistic. We know where we come from. So I can propose at least 5. I don't want to say absolutist, I don't want to say eternal, but I say solid ideas because I know for a fact that they've been around for 3,000 years and they are in many senses responsible for us sitting here tonight. So the first one in the realm of moral philosophy is the question of personal character. What's your character? And this is a question to each of us. Who am I in the sense of how do I conduct myself and through the course of my actions? The second one is, of course, the theory or the thought that our intentions matter more than anything else. This is the Kantian thinking. And then there's the thinking that really puts forward the consequence of our actions. So all of a sudden, here you have the intention, the action, which is embedded in your character, and then the result. And then there are 2 more great ideas that have been traveling around our universe for many years. And this is the question of freedom, which is not our own freedom, but also the freedom of the other. And this is an existential ethics, which I think no one in this universe can ignore. And the last, perhaps the most ancient idea, is the idea of care. Care is perhaps the deepest human intuition that arranges us all and allows us to live in a community. So what I would like to do now, passing on the baton to Carrie and then to Tomer, is to ask them to share with us processes of thought that they take part in their personal experience, processes of thought that we as audience do not see the results right away on the screen. You know, 10,000 years ago, ancient travelers who landed on the shores of Greece passed on to the Greeks that dictum, that eternal dictum saying, know thyself. Knowing yourself or learning more about yourself, I think, is what the corona gave us. It's kind of a time to stop and look into ourselves and not think that we are just like, oh, we're dummies, we're losing time instead of doing something important. So Carrie and then Tomer, please share with us to the best of your ability whatever we cannot see in the everyday life, and what is it that drives you or enables you to go through the stormy waters of our everyday reality. So Carrie, you're first, please.
Thank you so much, Dan, and thank you to CoPro for having me. I'm here in Northern California. It's 10 a.m. so you might, and it's very hot here, so you might hear some birds and other noise in the background. Thank you, Dan, for setting that up so well. Actually, you made me think of so many things that I didn't necessarily intend to talk about, but you raised so many important issues. First, I just want to kind of give some context to who I am and what I'm doing here. I work with the International Documentary Association, which is based in Los Angeles. And we support international documentary filmmakers in a wide variety of ways. We're a membership organization, but we're really accessible. We have one of the last remaining magazines about documentary film called Documentary. And you can find us at documentary.org. I'll put that in the chat. And we also do grants. We do philanthropic grants to documentary films. I run a fund in particular that supports filmmakers who are working at the intersection of journalism and doing high-risk work. And that takes a range of artistic approach, from the highly artistic and conceptual to what would be more current affairs. And we're looking to support all genres of documentary film, but really looking at a filmmaker's journalistic practice, which you may or may not see on the screen. And that's, you know, in reference to what Dan is bringing up, is a lot of what we're interested in is what happens behind the scenes. And how a filmmaker is operating. What is their practice and their relationship to their subjects and to their characters? How are they fact-checking if fact-checking is necessary? How are they looking at information or disinformation? What is their research practice? What are the litigious and legal issues that they might need to be concerned about, because that's the world we live in? What are their challenges in terms of safety if they're working in a hostile environment? So it really tries to take a full range so that we can support people who are engaging in different artistic practices. So that's what documentary or International Documentary Association does. In this moment, we're providing a lot of practical information, especially for US filmmakers. But one of the things that happened for us very early on in the pandemic is that filmmakers really wanted us to put out a statement about safe production. What would be some standards and practices that filmmakers could engage in right now to safely produce? And instead of being reactive and taking a more reflective approach and looking at all of the data, looking at what's happening around the globe, we really felt like we couldn't do that things around the globe, even within the United States, even within one state here, were so radically different, and that this pandemic was unfolding in such a way that there was not a one-size-fits-all solution to this, that you had to take this as an ethical question. You as a filmmaker, wherever you are situated, that it was an ethical decision whether or not you could engage in filmmaking. And so Amit raised all these different films that they're doing in response, which seem to take it from a very personal point of view of what the filmmakers are experiencing. And that was possible to do in that capacity. And then there have been other situations where you simply can't shoot. And then other situations where people are going out and covering hospitals or covering what's happening in the pandemic or covering Wuhan, if you will. So I think our goal has been to say that it is an ethical decision. And it's been interesting, at least here in the States, where I haven't heard the word ethics used so much in my entire career as I've heard in the last 2 or 3 months. And I think that's actually a great thing. And I think this moment of reflection is actually a positive thing. Dan, you raised something really interesting, though, about our field, which is if you look at film history, and I also teach film history at Berkeley, documentary history, we have always been guided by technology. Technology has always been the thing that has instructed our practice more than almost anything else. And so at this moment where access to the technology is so ubiquitous, where we all have a camera, where we all have the capacity to be a filmmaker, I think we would all agree that that democratization has been really profound and has profoundly had a profound impact on our global culture and on visual storytelling and on people's accessibility to nonfiction storytelling. And at the same time, I think that has led to a lot less reflection in the work that we do, because we all have the capacity to do it, because we all have the access. That idea of asking who we are, what is our point of view, how do we relate to our protagonists, how do we relate to our audience, all the film theory that I think many of us are steeped in some ways has dissipated. And I think that if you look at the filmmaking in the 80s and 90s here in the States, at least, it was very, very heavily informed by film theory, or at least film theory was a big piece of what we did. And I feel like, I try to infuse film theory into my students' understanding of documentary filmmaking. It's not necessarily something that we all come to the table with anymore. And film theory and film practice have become much more separate sides of the house. So I'm actually excited to have a moment of reflection where we can start to engage in the bigger questions of our field. And I think one of the things, not to focus on the pandemic, because I do think it plays out so differently across the globe, but I think one of the things that at least it's raised for us at IDA is this idea of what is our responsibility to our protagonists in this situation, because their safety in our hands is a totally different equation than it is in a hostile environment or even other pandemics like cholera or Ebola. I mean, this is a different moral question of, is our crew safe, are our subjects safe, and then how do we engage with our community at large, wherever we live, because of the nature of the spread of this pandemic and how it operates, and with its with the lack of knowledge, with the lack of immunity, what are our responsibilities? And so that's a question that I think we're really engaging in, and I think opens up so many other questions. One of the things that we've always asked as funders is, why are you the person to tell this story? And I think in our field, a lot of times filmmakers can tell a story simply because they have the access, because they're great filmmakers and they have the access, and that's enough. And I think in this moment, we're asking for a little bit more depth of why are you the person to tell this story? What more do you bring to it? How are you thinking about it? How are you engaging with these different relationships? What is your social responsibility? So I think I'll leave it at that, because I'm really interested in hearing what Tomer has to say, and in hearing in particular what maybe some ideas from the audience. But I'll stop there and look forward to continuing the conversation, and I'll put some links in the chat as well.
Right. I have one question which I would postpone to you following your words, but let's remember what you said that regarding the problem of responsibility. So let us make sure that we come back to that, okay?
Sure.
All right, Tomer, the floor is all yours.
Hi, so I hope we won't agree about too many things. I'm already afraid.
Yes.
Agreement in so many levels, it scares me. And I know some people, filmmakers that with us, like Tamar Tal, I think, from Italy, and she's Israeli filmmaker, but she's right now in Italy, and hope they can also either ask question or give some example from their experience. I prepare a short timeline. I mean, my editor prepared it from 3 different projects. I start with the soft one, which is I Shot My Love, which I remember like it was many years ago when I made it, but it started with a short shot with my mom in the shower. And I already remember people either from foundation or from the channel and some audience didn't like it. It's very soft. And even like it's clear that she gave me permission to have it. It's clear. So my principle, of course, it's like I always have full awareness that the heroes, the protagonists, characters know that I'm filming. I never hide it. In some way, the aliens, ברית, מי שיודע פה באנגלית, הברית, the aliens?
Alliance, perhaps.
Aliens. I mean, for me, the most important thing, and this is a question I will be really interesting from Dan, from Amit, from Kerry, like, it's like the commitment to who? For me, it's a big question. Commitment is more to your character or more to the audience. I mean, you might, in my case, I get permission from the character. You might see it in 1-2 minutes. And then audience took it really hard, criticized, which is fine, blame me about going too far with border, whatever, it's okay. And then, you know, they said, okay, so what if Jonathan Agassi gave me permission? So what if the parents of your partner, we might see it soon, I Shot My Love in a Christmas time. So what if your mom agree? What about us? What about the people who might come with a different set of norms? And this is, I'm really curious to hear opinion from the panel and from people. So shortly, I will say I choose just 3 movies. I Shot My Love is about a relationship with me and German partner. And at the end, you might see a Christmas situation. The parents know that I'm coming with a camera, but still you can feel like the uncomfortable situation that I took the camera up and took it down. And a big question if it's, and from some German audience, it was really hard. The second example is from Paper Doll, which I follow a group of 7 queer community from the Filipino, transsexual, transgender, some queer, some drag people. And there's one scene with a taxi driver that talked in a very radical, even today, I asked myself, it's a movie from 15 years ago, if I will do the same. I'm not sure, but he talked in a very nasty, violence way. And the first thing, before I publish the movie, I asked my character, the Paper Dolls, is it okay to show it? Because they are not in the taxi while he's talking to me. And they say, of course. And then the movie was invited to a huge women university, one of the biggest human university in Manila. I'm talking about 3,000 people in one screening. I never had it before. And a week before I was supposed to fly to the Philippines, a very impressive and smart woman called me, and she's the head of, and I was, why do you call me? And what do you mean? She go around, and then Tomer, you know, you're coming as a special guest. Is it okay that we will cut out the taxi driver scenes from your movie? Automatically I say yes. I mean, she explained, you know, it might create a really offensive, and it might hurt the local people from the university and from the Philippines. And I told her, of course, it's the last thing I want to do is coming with a movie as a special guest and to hurt someone. So I say yes. And the same night, I just I had a phone call with the characters, the paper dolls, and immediately they told me, Tomer, please, please, please don't take it out. So I was in between the university and the character, and a big question. You might see it. I'm curious to say.
What did you do? What did you decide to do? And
in the end, I went with the paper dolls. They told me, Tomer, the way this guy is talking to us, and everyone is, wow, how he dare to talk. And it's really, you don't talk like this to people if it's not clear. You don't talk. But they told me it's important that people will see on a daily basis what's coming to our face, this kind of racism. Another element in these scenes that I don't know if I changed or not through the years, I'm sitting in the taxi. Sometimes I prefer not to give my opinion to the people. I gay by myself, I'm from the queer community. Of course, what he says is also against me. And sometimes you need, I don't know, I'm not sure, I'm not sure I know something more than anyone else. I just share my experience. Like, sometimes I feel it's even more smart and even more our job to answer the right things, to say, no, how you dare to talk against Palestinian, against women, against Filipinos, against queer, and to show audience how liberal and open. And sometimes by this, you avoid these voices to be all over. It's a question. And in the third example, it's my latest movie. It's Jonathan Agassi Saved My Life. That was the hardest creation to me till today, with very double way of reaction. Some people really appreciate, some people, I even say, hate me or angry. In this case, also Amit Gורן, the head of the foundation, I'm really curious how he didn't push the movie, because other places push me and with movie, and Amit Gורן decided to support it, and he was also advised me on very high level of smart things. So I never spoke with him about why at the end he took it. So maybe it's the best is to jump into the water and to, from my point of view, it's okay instead to talk, to share it, and then to hear, the filmmaker around us or people, and you. That's my advice.
I want, Tomer, I want, with your permission, to interrupt here, just briefly ask you a question. So an ethical dilemma is a position in which clearly there's no distinction between good and bad. Like, shall I go out to the street and just murder someone? Not today. That's not an ethical dilemma, right? An ethical dilemma is where, on the one hand, you have dear audience and people who host you, which obviously you care for, and you care for your reputation as a polite person, kind, etc., right? And on the other hand, of course, you have another dear value, as dear, that is your responsibility toward your protagonists. Can you please insert us to the back of your mind and say, what was the principle that made you prefer that end, that horn of the dilemma rather than the other one? Why? What informed you?
I think the best, I will talk about it, and even soon you might see it. Of course, we cut it shortly, but when I was shooting my latest project, Jonathan Agassi Saved My Life, at the beginning, this protagonist, not in the beginning, but I follow him a few years, but after 2 years, it was clear that he started to use very heavy drugs, not smoking marijuana for one night. He's heavy crystal meth, tina, the rape drugs, which called, I forgot the name, tough drugs, okay? So the game was, and I cooperate with it because he's my protagonist, like each time he's going outside from the frame when I was shooting him, and he went to his sleeping room or whatever, I saw him with a pipe, with everything. It was clear he's doing it. And he told me, Tomer, I gave you the permission to show me it's about porn, it's about rent, it's about people who suck my dick for whatever, do whatever you want, sex with the computer, crazy stuff. He didn't have any problem, but you never dared, and so it was clear I'm not play with it. Okay, so the principle, and I call it the game because there was a moment that I said, Tomer, so for gain this character, you're not going to talk about this element, or you don't going to show it. It was already dilemma that answered to you while I'm shooting the project. I don't remember what solution I had. I just felt inside of me start to have problem. And then the situation you might see soon was like this. So Jonathan Agassi start to do, and then he says, you know, Tomer, tonight I want, it's okay. Tonight show me doing the drugs, and I promise to all my character that at the end, all my character, you know, this is my answer. The way to go really far with things is to let your, how do you say, protagonists, heroes, characters,
good enough.
What?
Protagonist is good enough.
The protagonist to come to the editing room and before you publish the movie, and you know what I found? People say, Toma, you went too far, you crossed the borders, maybe they're right, but I discovered that many other directors, more ethical than me, more have whatever they think about themselves, basically, they use the idea that the protagonist signed a contract 7 years ago and they protect. So because they know some of them, not all of them, but I'm talking with friends and colleagues that I lately talked about it. So yeah, once we have this agreement, we don't need to call them and to have problem and to, but I think what it's create, that it's not let you to go really far with your movie because you're afraid to deal with it. And with me, even I have this contract, I never use it. For me, it's no meaningful. I ask them to come to the editing room before the premiere to sit and to take responsibility about the creation. And once they give me permission and I feel like they understand what it means, Paper Dolls, there's a Filipino, there's fucked up teenager boys from Israel in Tomer, it's kind of scared me, Tomer Vasutim, or Jonathan Agassi, then I have all the power to go all the way with my inside ethical. So going back to this example that you're going to see in a few minutes, Jonathan is start doing these drugs. I was naive, and now I'm not naive anymore. I didn't know the effect while you use these drugs. And I'm not so naive guy, but it's not was my world, okay? So I'm start doing an interview. After a very short time, when I always ask him about his mother and about the father, not the mother, about the father, he refused to say, my father was dying, my father is not in my life. Okay, there's no story. Then he started to tell me a story. And I prepare people, it's tough to watch it. So if people have issue with it, maybe close your eyes or think not to watch it. He started to tell me something personal and problematic in any aspect. And you don't understand if he started to say it because he's on drugs. Not that he lied me, it was clear that it's true. And later on I asked question, so what are you doing? You stop your camera right now? Or you let the camera run? And what happened later on in a different scenes that short,
let's watch it.
To the movie, but I'm sorry, you have to understand the movie have bigger contracts about family, parents, but we choose to talk about ethics. So just to finish it, at the end, I decide to shoot it. The soundman escaped from the room and say, I will never work with you. I will never work with you, Tomer. And I was with the cameraman, shall we stop, shall we shoot? And I told him, Jonathan will see it. Jonathan told me to shoot also tough moment. Let's decide about it 3-4 years from now with perspective of time.
Okay, so let's...
I think the best is to watch this example.
Let's do it. All right, let's do it.
בוא נצלם את הראי.
מה, ולא רואים כלום.
אתה לא תחצה, אני מנתיח אומה.
אני לא רואה כלום דרך הראי, התחמקת.
מה?
רואה ראי ריק.
רואה ראי? אתה אומר?
לא רואים כלום, אני אומר לך את האמת, רואה ראי, איפה את? תכנסי למראה, הנה, אני לא רואה אותך.
מה אתה לא רואה? ראי?
לא ראיתי כלום.
תראה איזה גדולה אני.
מה זה?
איזה ענקית אני.
לא מכיר כל כך, תפסיקי.
זה עשה שוט יפה, אה?
לא היה ממש כלום. לא היה כלום. בכית באיזשהו שלב?
לא. יאללה, צלם כל הברזלים.
את לא נורמלית.
אני לא ראיתי את זה.
יודעי.
שקט. הם יזרקו אותך מפה תכף, זה מדהים. צילמת אותי. רגע. כן. זהו, אני אוכל לעשות. כן. יש לך? כן. יאללה, צה שיכולה לקחת אותי. יאללה, תסגור את הדל.
ביי.
תסגור את הדל. תכניס רק את הרגל. הרגל הזאת אסור לי להתכופף.
אז אל תתכופפי, נו. בצד שני מותר לך? מה? קשה?
Maria aber bewahrte alles, was geschehen war, in ihrem Herzen und dachte darüber nach. Die Hirten zurück, rühmten Gott und priesen ihn für das, was sie gehört und gesehen hatten. Denn alles war so gewesen, wie es ihnen gesagt worden war. Sag mal.
Jetzt muss ich Pause machen. Ich kann nicht singen.
You're working here, right?
Yes.
What are you guys doing here?
We're metaper.
מטפל?
Yes.
שני יצורים מגעילים, שאני לא יודע איך לקרוא להם, מגעילים כגבר ומגעילים אותי כחיקוי לאישה בזויה, אני לא יודע אפילו איך לקרוא לזה. באמת. למה זה מגעיל אותי? כי אישה צריכה להיראות אישה, ולא כמו הבהמות שהושבת לי שני פיליפינים מסריחים מגעילים. בוא אני אסביר לך מה קורה בפיליפינים. פיליפינים מדינה ענייה מאוד. אתה $1.50. לוקח לך שתי פיליפיניות ללילה, אתה קודם כל לא יודע מה אתה לוקח, אם זה ליידי בוי, או עד שאתה לא בודק שהן שמות את הנייר טואלט מתחת, מחביאות את הזין עמוק בתוך הקיבינימט שלהם, ואתה לא מזהה כלום, אתה חושב שאתה בכלל עם בחורה אחוז שקשוקי של כוסית, והיא כוסית. ואז אתה פתאום מקבל שפרונגול, ואתה נותן לה מכות, ואתה מרביץ, ואתה זורק מהחדר, וצוחקים עליך שבוע ימים. לא אוהב את זה. הם גונבים, איכס, וזה טבעי אצלם, ההומואיות וכל זה, שם זה מקור השטן, שם זה מקור הצרות. ופה בארץ הם משחקים אותה, עובדת את זה, זה כן.
זה לא בשבילנו.
We used to peep. They're making, in the mikveh. In the mikveh, we go out of the window and we see them. They're nude. And some of them, they're making, באמת. באמת, really. כן. Two. Man, they make...
one-to-one?
Yeah. I'll show you where. We stand there and we open the window a little and we'll see what's inside. How many times they broke it? Bleed glasses, so it's good for us.
יואו, אתה יודע מה? בוא, הנה, אתה רוצה תמונות, אתה רוצה דרמות. הנה, הכל עלה עכשיו. שחף יש בר מצווה. שחף מקבל כרטיס סבתא של אמא של רביב. יונתן רוצה גם לנסוע לגרמניה. אני זוכר שחזרתי נורא פגוע מרביב. שהוא קרא לי הומו. איזה אבא עושה דבר כזה?
עושה מה?
מסדר לבן שלו זיונים. וזה למה הוא קרא לי הומו. הוא רצה שאני אזיין אותה, ואני לא יכולתי לזיין אותה, לא? והיא נשקע אותי וזה, התנשק לו כזה בפה. בואי נראה לך אותה.
איפה זה קרה כל זה?
בפרנקפורט.
לא, בבית זונות?
לא, היא הייתה חברה של אבא שלי. בזוג. אבא שלי כאילו סידר את כל העניין, זה בשביל שנזיין אותה. עד שכך הייתי ב-12.
וכעסת עליו?
אני רק רציתי שיהיה לי חוטיני. אני אחרי איזה גאווה, וואי, יש לי חוטיני, הבאתי חוטיני מגרמניה.
יונתן. בוא אני אביא לך מים.
וואו.
קום, הכל בסדר. שנייה.
כמה סמים עשיתי במים האלה? יו.
יונתן, דבר איתי שנייה, אפשר רגע?
Dan, I think you're on mute.
Yeah, sorry about that. Toma, can you hear me?
Now I can hear you. Yeah.
All right. And Carrie, can you hear me? We good?
Yes.
All right. Toma, is it okay if we suspend for a moment our discussion over your films? I think the impression is strong enough. Hold it right there, all the audience. We'll be back with you shortly. I just don't want to lose a point which has to do with something you're going to speak about next. But Carrie, you were mentioning the point that we have responsibility toward our protagonists. And I want to ask you, there basically, roughly speaking, there are two models of attitude. One of them, you might say, in an old-fashioned Kantian way, that our responsibility toward our protagonist is what we call absolute, meaning we are obliged, ethically speaking, always to treat them as full human beings, as what we call ends in themselves, never merely as tools, as objects in the process of our making. So this is like an absolutist model. So my question to you is, when you say that we have an issue with how to deal with our protagonist, and I offer you two big rivers of options, would you take the absolutist way, saying the protagonists and our duty to them as full human being is first, or should we take another approach which is relativistic, saying, okay, in this situation, we might be better off giving them or taking from them X, Y, Z, but in other situations, we're liable to say to them, hey guys, I'm sorry, this is a film. This is me, a filmmaker. There's money put here, with all due respect. Now, this is a relativistic model. I mean, I do have responsibility, but with all due respect, it's limited. Which one would you say is the one you would follow?
I would say, this is where I start to sound like a lawyer. I would say it depends, right? It depends on the protagonist. So when I think of the Jonathan Agassi film, which I thought, I really appreciated this film a lot. I found it really refreshing in its honesty. And so one of the things that I feel as nonfiction storytellers, for me, my moral compass is to the truth. And so if Tomer had decided to hide the addiction or to tone it down, I would not have trusted him as a filmmaker. I mean, clearly there's something going on. And if he didn't tell me as a viewer what was happening, I wouldn't have trusted him. And I think my relationship to the filmmaker in his film is that I trust him. I trust that he's telling me the truth. I also trust that he's dealing with his protagonist in an honest way. I mean, his protagonist is a savvy image maker himself. He understands his relationship to the camera. He knows that the camera is capturing him doing these things. And I won't give anything away, but I think, ultimately, if you watch the whole film, you understand the protagonist and how the protagonist feels about what was shot, right? And so I feel like I trust that the protagonist understood the relationship, that he knew what he was, what his relationship was to the camera, to the filmmaker, and that Tomer, also had an ethical responsibility to us. It's a really complicated set of decisions that were made. I'm always the first person. I mean, what's so beautiful and wonderful about documentary filmmaking, and I think why we're all in this business, is that it is super rich, super complex. Mm. And every day you're making all of these decisions that have a huge consequence. The decision itself, one edit might feel very small, but in the big scheme of things, it's big. Or the idea of to roll your camera or not. So the benefit that we have is time and is the ability to roll, but it doesn't mean we have to use it. So I always tell my students, yes, keep the camera going. You never turn off the camera. Do not turn off the camera unless somebody literally is saying, turn off the camera. Okay, maybe then you have to do that, and that's what you've negotiated. But if you can let things roll, then you have the ability to take the time, to take the space, to consider, to have discussions with your team, with your commissioning editors, with the subject about, well, how do we deal with this situation? So I always feel like we're in the business of truth telling on some level. It could be a more philosophical truth, it could be a composite truth, but what we're trying to get to is some nut of truth, right? And so how do we get there? The one place where I would diverge from this is that some people don't have agency. So some protagonists might not understand this relationship with the camera or the filmmaker. Kids come to mind. I mean, I'm always really, really careful when it comes to minors and to kids, because is it fair? And you see these films all the time, kids who are being trafficked, kids in foster care, kids whose parents are abusive or neglectful. And you see this, it's very tempting, that crisis moment, right, to capture the crisis. But then kids are encapsulated in those moments. Sometimes it's kids misbehaving, doing things that, you know, don't look so good for them for their entire lives. And so do they have the agency? Are they really able to understand the consequences of being in that frame forever?
What's your answer for this?
My answer is you have to be really careful, and that actually you have to weigh those considerations. And to me, I err toward protecting the kids. So I really do. That is the place where I really diverge, where I feel like we have an obligation to protect the kids, to think of their future, to think of how this looks, to think about the truth too. And I also think that as filmmakers, there's always a way to tell the story with truth and integrity, with respect and dignity. I mean, I think a lot of times in those crisis moments is that people don't have dignity. And I think what's great about Tomer's film is that Jonathan, you know, he is obviously suffering on so many levels, but I think by giving us the roots of what his suffering is, his family roots, we understand that. And then we have empathy for him, and he still has dignity at the end. And so I think, you know, you can't take somebody's dignity from them. I think you have to be open-minded about their complexity and where they're coming from. So I always feel like there's a way for us to do our job and to do it with integrity, but also sensitively. So I guess I'm not totally answering your question, but I think it depends. And that's where ethics is really important. And working with people who've made a lot of ethical decisions is also very helpful to start to weigh these things. Well, what are the consequences? What if we do this? What will happen? What if we don't do it? You know, yeah, if we don't and let the audience know about his addiction, then the film has no integrity. I mean, you know, what's the film about? So I think, you know, working through those things and being thoughtful about them is actually something that we can do as filmmakers. We have the benefit of time. So that's not a good answer to your question.
No,
but
well, it is a very good one, because tell me if I'm wrong, but if I read you correctly, what basically you're saying that you stand for a relativistic approach, meaning our job is to weigh all the factors and get a decision. It could be one decision in one context. So it's contextual ethics. I mean, it's not a canteen like never do this or never do that. You'll go for that. But my question to you, and Tomer, we're right with you. My question to you, you said, I trust Tomer. And I remind you one of the most beautiful definitions for documentary, and that is that which can be lied with regard to. Meaning the difference between fiction and documentary is that in fiction there can be no lies, because that reality does not exist in reality. And documentaries, the potential of lying, well, the potentiality of lying defines it being documentary. Why do you trust Tomer? I mean, if lying, I mean, you're speaking about truth, but if lying is inherent to the medium, why do you trust him?
Yeah, in some ways I don't want to give it away, and you know, maybe I shouldn't, but I think it's the different touch points, the different pieces of information that he's sharing with us, all the way to the very end. So you have to get to the credits to know what I'm talking about. But it's giving us a large view, so that I say, like, okay, I don't necessarily feel like, I'm not saying that it answers every question, or that I would make all those same decisions, or that I wouldn't struggle with some of those decisions. I'm just saying that if you look at the totality of it, and the different points that are raised in the film, the kind, you know, or even alluded to, that I feel like I come out with a picture that feels like, okay, this is a good example of what this person went through. It doesn't speak to everybody every addict's experience. It doesn't speak to everybody's family experience necessarily. It doesn't necessarily speak to everybody in the porn industry, but this is his experience. And I do feel like there's different ways in which he lets the audience know that he's signposting for us. But you're right. I mean, we all know, it starts though with that they shot this film for 7 years. So we all know that when you take 7 years down to 90 minutes, that is the ultimate lie, right there, that this is a kind of a composite. It's a portrait of that 7 years condensed in time. I mean, that's what we do. That's what makes it so important for us to weigh all of those decisions in the editing room about what are we taking away from that 7 years? And I've certainly had that experience. I do show my films also to people who are in them. And the last one we made about a jazz pianist who, there were several, it's a verite film. He's a complicated figure. He survived a 2-month coma. He's an AIDS survivor. And so it's a really complicated portrait of him as a very well-known jazz pianist. And there were definitely issues and scenes where he really wanted us to take them out. He really, maybe he's not at his best or it doesn't quite look good, but we felt like in the end, that was who he is. We spent 2 years with him, like that it is a fair representation of him in all his complexity. And in the end, he agreed. And then, the film, those stayed. I mean, I think the other important thing though, is that we can't cede editorial control to our subjects or our protagonists. We can't allow them to make those decisions. And it is a really interesting negotiation as documentary filmmakers. It is totally unique from journalism and other forms of nonfiction storytelling, which is what makes it so exciting and wonderful, I think.
Thank you. Tomer, I am 100% certain that if I ask you as a person, Tomer, what do you think lying is good, or are you a liar? Do you lie in your life? You'll certainly say, well, I don't stand for lying. So my question to you, speaking about the art of storytelling, how do you make sense to yourself about the tension between truth-telling and the innate necessity, which many philosophers have been speaking about, that, as Carrie said, storytelling is in many senses lie-telling. I mean, we have to lie in order to expose truth. But in your world, which obviously is very straight in the face, how do you make sense between you knowing truth and lie? Is it as plainly and vulgarly as some people say good and bad? Or is it arranged in your mindset in a different way? How do you work with these values?
I think it took time for me to take responsibility as a director on my movies, which means all the issue about truth, which I don't believe with it anymore. It's not, in this case, it's my movie, it's Carrie's movie, it's your movie. Like if Carrie will do the same movie about Jonathan Agassi saved my life, even she was like connected to the movie, it was how she liked it or didn't like. It's very clear that she will attack it from a different point of view, and the same story will be completely different. So
are all points of attack legitimate? Can you justify any hypothetical point of attack? I mean, is all accepted, or are there some things which should be considered a priori before we approach a protagonist or situation? What's your take on it?
I'm on the radical side, which means, like if I'm going also to movies that was made in the war in a situation. And again, it's the most important it's not so complicated, and it's complicated. It's simple because you need to respect your character. They trust you and they give you something with the most important for me is to remember the meaningful and the values that these people give in my hand. Who I am, that someone, and as Carrie also mentioned, not all of them for sure have full awareness what it means that later on all your life, as long as the movies exist and no one took it out from the net, all your life it will be a frozen moment on your life. I don't think even people understand.
Yeah.
And once you understand it as a filmmaker, it's help you to be more careful, but it's not instead to dare to go far. You know what I mean? Like, so, and of course, like, what do you mean? If I will see something that I will feel that, you know, it's my camera might create damage to someone, but if the damage exists anyway, it's there. In some way, my responsibility is to shoot it and to share it, even if it will put many people in uncomfortable situation.
Okay, we have a question from the audience, and here it goes. It says, do you think ethics of journalism should be applied on documentary films? Would any of you like to comment? Even though I have some important question to you, Tomer, we'll have to hold that. Would you like to respond as, okay, ethics of journalism, should they be applied to documentary films? What's your take on it?
Sometimes. So I'm a journalist and I teach at the Graduate School of Journalism. So sometimes yes, but I think I hesitate to say yes all the time because it depends. The range of storytelling, of approaches, of, everything that comes into play when someone takes on a film, it just totally depends. But there are moments where they should be and moments where they don't necessarily apply. I think one of the things that's really distinct from journalism is that documentary filmmakers are by and large independents. They are independent people capturing a story on their own with their own vision and their own storytelling vision. And I would hate for everybody to come under some set of standards and practices that would in some ways inhibit the artistic piece of this, which we haven't talked about as much, but there's a whole artistic part of this that isn't necessarily part and parcel to journalism. Sometimes it is there, sometimes not.
I'd like just to add that if we really want to confront this beautiful question, we have to have some basic knowledge about the history of how documentary evolved and kind of made this fork and this battle of ideas, whether it should be based on information or it should be based on drama and feeling and emotion. And this is a century-old battle of ideas. And it's very, very hard to trace the moment in which you can speak of them as different ethics, because in many senses, or you might even say in more senses than not, journalism and documentary share common ancestors and common ethics, and they divert only in few specifics. So I think the discussion has to be also based on history. But thank you for answering that. Tomer, I think this question is to you. Have you ever had a situation in which you decided not to use the footage because the character wasn't comfortable with it?
Many times it's happened to me.
Why? Why would you leave out because he's not comfortable? As we said in the beginning, the protagonist not being comfortable, at least according to Carrie, is a relativistic point of attack. I mean, he might be not comfortable. You might say, or you have the authority or the moral position to say, I'm sorry, this is not about making you comfortable. I have responsibility to the truth. So what is it that in your mindset makes you prefer the protagonist's comfort on the account of truth or your responsibility to the audience? What's your take on it?
It depends. Also, when this third party, which means when you shoot someone and he's your protagonist, he gave permission and he's going to meet someone, or is someone else that will never gain anything from the movie, or is not connected to the movie, I will think much more time about the third. But and something else that come to my mind connect to these questions, that I want that the people that make movies that will, as a symbol, it's not very important, but till today it's always happened to me, they need to come to the premiere proud and carry the movie. It's maybe from an egoistic place. As Tomer, I don't want to carry all my life the idea that I shame someone, that I brought someone to be, to a shame from the movie. He choose to be part of it. I just don't want to be in this place. And once I think for me, I understood it, it's helped me to make decision what to shoot and what not to shoot. And for example, I don't know these days in the paper doll, when they're going to the mikveh, it's outside. The law in Israel, in public places, you're allowed to shoot. So it's on legal level, I was fine. Now they're talking about masturbate between men. It's a big issue in the Jewish world. It's not so. It's not make sense. I don't know if you remember. There's an old rabbi, an old Jewish man, just crossed the street at the same time. Nothing connect to the same situation. For audience, it's clear. And at the same time, what happened? Chiki say a very important message. Tomer, come with us, Sarah. I will show you. It's not a big deal. So the people that were around the situation, I'm allowed to shoot them. I felt comfortable, but I'm sure if someone will see the movie, they will find themselves connect to the subjects that now we talked about. Masturbate like in the mikveh with two male people. And I asked myself these days when I show it, when we saw it, so I was supposed to consider it or not, and what's bad about it. So I'm going back to what Carrie said. It's in every moment. I don't believe what I try to say. I don't believe that it's a decision that once you made ethical list, in some way you go with us a 5. I don't believe with it so much. It's every moment, every situation, every different character. You need to check it. You need to ask it. You need to ask yourself, and not to come with a set of, list of that and V at the end of the movie after 7 years. Yeah, I was good. No, it's a question that's relevant to any moment while you're doing the movie.
Okay, so we are. You portray a state of being in which, while making a film, you are in constant flux. Everything changes, the set of the condition changes. At some moments you can postpone decisions. Every situation can be taken from another angle. My question to you is there a principle or a value that will always stand there for you in making a decision no matter what? Because here's the complexity. You say that you really, really, really cherish the honor and the respect toward your protagonists. Nonetheless, you really shoot them in harsh situations. If you were in a conflict, and I'm sure you were, and I want you to share this with us, in a situation where, on the one hand, you had the respect toward your protagonist, but on the other hand, there was a deep truth about the film. How do you go about it? How do you say, no, it's all about my protagonist, not the truth of the film? How do you know which way to go?
In some way, I would prefer to delete or not to finish, and not to I prefer that the movie won't be published, and I also did it in my life. When I feel that the unwritten contract with me and my protagonist basically hide from me, or something true, I know something about him, probably what I will feel, and that's my advice to the people and the other filmmaker here around, or if you're a student or young, and then it's to listening. It's kind of loyalty or solidarity to your heart. It's something inside. It's not outside. It's inside. And then you say, what I'm cooperate with fake the true because I don't want to hear it. So better not to create this movie. So also we need to talk about the ability to erase or to not to complete movies. No one says that once we start a movie or whatever, we need to complete it and we need to put it on air. Just a reminder, and I've been there. I've been there in situation, as you say right now. I felt that I lie myself. It's not to the audience. Sorry, audience. Audience, it's amazing. We cannot, we are not creation without audience. It's a dead body. But completely audience not relevant from my point of view to this question. In this, audience will be in the end, and they will go home and talk with their husband or wife or daughter or whatever, and they like it or not. איך אומרים? אני לא חושב שהם צריכים להיות צד במשוואה. Sorry.
They're not part of the equation, you mean?
Indeed, about this, because I feel lately too many movies was made for audience ethical principle and norms, and you going home, wow, the director, man or a woman, whatever, wow, she was so moral, she was so beautiful, and she so care about and you felt like the target was audience. So maybe it's fine for the ethical aspect, but as a piece of art, I feel cheesy and I'm not satisfied, and I have problem with it.
All right, we have another question saying, did you ever feel you wanted to react to what your character said or did and get spontaneously in front of the camera. I think we saw such a moment where you really passed on sides. Carrie, what do you have to say if I'm behind the camera? What, is there something interesting except the part of just doing something aesthetically different and crossing that borderline and stepping in front of the camera? Do you see it as an ethical decision? Or what are we talking about when we're saying we have sometimes to cross the line or be in front of the camera or not? What is the conversation about?
Right. That question of do you become, I mean, to me, it's the question is, do you become part of the story? And sometimes the filmmakers...
Aren't you part of the story anyhow?
You're part of the story, but are you a character? You know, I think that's...
Aren't you a character even if you're behind the camera?
Yes, you are figurative, or you're the storyteller, right? Okay. I don't know that being the storyteller makes you a character, but I think when you cross the line, and does that become part of the story? Do you play a bigger role? What is your voice? Is it an actual voice? Do we have a sense of you as the filmmaker in the room? And I think that takes all, you know, I think it just depends. Again, it's always dependent on the situation. And there are so many incredible moments, though. I think the restraint of documentary filmmaking, of not interfering or of not crossing that line, is also what makes it really interesting and complex. And as the viewer kind of trying to take on that decision-making moment. And I think of the film Camera Person. There's an incredible scene in the film Camera Person, Kirsten Johnson's film. She's a cinematographer. And there's a scene, and she's shooting, and there's a 2-year-old who has an axe, you know, maybe about a 2-year-old who has an axe and is chopping wood. And you hear her behind the camera saying, "Oh my goodness, oh no," but she never goes, you know, and takes the axe from the child, right? Because clearly the child's surrounded by family and lives in a rural area, and that's kind of part of being a child in that scenario. So I think you're kind of always weighing that. Though I did want to respond, though, to the person who asked the question about, is there ever a moment where you didn't use footage? And I just would say, comfort, not so much to me would be a reason not to use something, but danger, like the idea is this person or somebody in this scene in danger because I use this footage? That's a real question. And to me, there is a real moral impulse there and an ethical responsibility that if you're putting somebody in danger by using a piece of footage, you probably should not use that footage. And so that to me is the line that I would not cross. Is I don't want to put anybody in danger by putting them on screen, just for the point of it.
Tomer, I want to come back to you and ask you, do you feel that when you are behind the camera, you actually stand for one ethical position, and when you're in front of the camera, you're actually exercising in a different moral position with respect both to yourself, to the protagonist, and to your film? Or is it for you part of one game you're playing?
One is to say one game, but one, now when you really put it into word, it's hard for me to say because it's different, because it's a lot about control. You know, when you're a protagonist and the camera on you basically, it's about losing control about almost everything. You don't understand the context, you don't know what choices will be made on with you. And once you are behind the camera, you have the ability to control and what will be left over behind it. Now what jumped to my mind, I think the name was, is from my point of view, very strong movie, Capturing the Freedmen. It's Foster Friedman. Yes. What was the name?
Capturing the Freedmen.
Yeah, it was many years ago, so I don't know if it's the new generation. For me, I really recommend you to tonight to see the movie. And why I mention it, because it's more close to the way I'm doing movies, that you start with one point, in this case, Jewish family, I don't remember, the brother is a clown, something simple, and then there's a lot of issues about if it was abuser or not. But the movie starts with one point, and then you feel the flow and the river of what's going on through, and it was very powerful movie because it's never fake the authentic way to ask these questions that right now carry you and me and the other people and also Amit ask ourselves. So that's what I'm looking for basically from documentary. For me, it's a failure if you start in one point and you basically finish with the same conclusion, or, you know, something is wrong about your creation. And capturing the film, and it's an amazing example how it's take you, it's so many ethical questions there. To stop the camera when you ask a Jewish teacher looking, he's a good man, no one knows till today, and then was in the computer, like porn with young boys, it's like you say, so what? No, you go with it, and then you create the movie, and you force yourself to ask the question while you are doing it. And this is give another layer to the
I just want to add that this same brilliant genius director made the Jinx, so you could already see his brilliance. But we have another question here, and it says the following: what about characters that you are exposing in the film, telling a story about something wrong that they're doing? What are the ethics of filming someone you object?
But what do you mean they say that something is wrong? I'm not sure I understood
it. I would say that, for example, the taxi driver that talks really kind of crappy talk, and obviously I would assume this is not something you stand for. I would even assume you object this kind of speech, and then nonetheless you show something that you object. What kind of ethics goes behind it? If I understand the question correctly, when you show such a character, obviously that you object, what justifies or what goes in your mind to say, this is the right thing to do? Why is it right for you to show?
I think in this case also Carrie can answer from her example or this. First of all, you don't, I believe you don't need to close the camera when something either evil or negative come to the camera, or even I don't think you need immediately to give a lecture to this person, because at the end, these paper dolls meeting it every day. Jonathan Agassi was for 100 times on the floor with drugs. What I felt that if sorry that I put a point, I created a movie, Mr. Gaga. It's about a very successful choreographer in Israel, Ohad Narin, and no one asked me ever in Israel. It was a very successful movie about dance, modern dance, and you see a lot of rehearsal in the studio. One after one after one. Then no one ever asked me, why do you share so many moments from the studio? Why do you show so many dance moments? Because it's clear you're going to see a movie about choreographer. What is your expectation? If you do a movie about porn and escort, so the context is important, and about drugs, for me it's the opposite. It's hypocrisy not to show this dark side of this character. And if you do a movie about paper doll, drug Filipino minorities that got a lot of violence from the police, from immigration, from taxi driver, and there you are sensitive and you don't want to show it, then my choice is to show it and to share it as long they are, and I think it's to give a lot of power to my protagonist, because in some way I'm not supposed to ask paper dolls about the taxi driver. It's not about them. It's a situation that was between me and him. And still I felt, and usually what I discover, that the protagonists are much more brave than the people in the foundation, the people from the TV shows, the audience. In some way, it's supposed to be the opposite. The character, the protagonists need to protect themselves, say, no, it's the opposite. They go all the way with you, and all the others says, put the shelter down. So, it's a question to which one you listen.
Carrie, what's your take on it?
Yeah, I think a lot of times those types of questions are, is this fair? So with Jonathan, if Jonathan had done crystal meth once in those 7 years, would that have been fair for Tomer to show that? No, I don't think so. So I think you come at this as like, is it critical to the story and is it fair? A lot of times when we're showing things, and this is something that happens in, I think, film theory and issues of ethnography and representation, is like, are we perpetuating a stereotype? Is that what the point of something is? To perpetuate something that we already think, or that the culture already thinks, to reinforce those ideas, often which are negative. And so I think you have to ask yourself, is it critical to the story? Is it fair? And, is this representation accurate? And how does that reverberate into the wider culture? Am I coming in with just a particular bias and seeing what I want to see and turning that in, conflating that into something more important than it is? So I think you're weighing all of the, ideally, you're weighing all of those things all the time.
It was very good point, Kerry. I mean, it's now really, in Hebrew we say, לא להוציא דברים מהקשרם. In English.
Okay, put things out of context, but Tomer, I asked you not to agree too much with Kerry, please.
No, I have a lot of, I can fight with her a lot, but when she put this point about, come on, if Jonathan in career of 10 years of porn was once doing meth, and the way you choose to present him as an addict to drugs, then come on, or once you have sex with someone at night and you have the lucky to get it and you make him someone that he's not. So this is very important point. I'm talking to filmmaker, even not to you and to Kerry, to the people who join us tonight, which is a really privilege to talk to them. It's a good point for them. Remember the whole picture, and that you don't jump on one element to make it more dramatic, and then you create damage to the character.
Right. I mean, the commercial side of our field loves drama, right, and loves those idiosyncrasies. And so I think it's easy when you're talking about commercial documentary to fall into those traps. And I think it's our jobs as independent storytellers to not do that.
We have one more question, but before that, I want to throw in the conversation a very famous kind of headline, and that is the tradition of the victim in documentary, said Brian Winston, very smart person. And he said the documentary has the tendency of just loving victims and really using the weak and the poor and the miserable to its own benefit, and then explaining to itself the truth, blah, 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 blah. Now, I want to ask you, how do you know, or how can you know, that we're not really lying to ourselves because we are addicted to fantastic stories that attract the audience, and we're not just really using these people and just really convincing ourselves that anyhow they would have been doing it? What do you have to say in the face of this dictum, the tradition of the victim in documentary? Tomer, Kerry, whoever wants to respond first. And then a question.
I'm not answering direct to you, but I don't know, it's again come to mind. You know, in documentary, maybe few cases, 97%, you not make money. I even consider myself kind of a successful filmmaker. I earn money that it's like everyone can earn it in the supermarket, okay? And I belong to the people that my movie is in cinema and blah, 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 blah. So compared to fiction and even to commercial, and I tell to people, money is not part of the issue. So there's some other motivation, you know?
For example, what is your motivation? What is your motivation? What is your motivation?
Sometimes is to put spot on evil situation and to help something. Like in my case, when I feel that people work from fears and there's evil and there's something that, and I believe with healing process while you're doing the movie, and that the result, the movie might help to have a strong mirror to the characters and to give them the ability to change something in life, as long as they are still alive, you know, not after dying and then, or before one day before you're dying. So, and it's about, in my case, the privilege that I meet amazing people that probably without the head of this being a documentary filmmaker, what's my connection to Filipino drag queen, or to I was follow Who's Gonna Love Me Now, which is in London about HIV and people, and like the idea that with this movie you create strong connection. It's something for me very strong, and
so it's so it's like a good adventure for you, would you say?
It's passion, it's adventure. In my case, it's also give me another level of meaningful to life. I don't know why to live life just to live them as most of the people are living. It's not enough. It's something also say something about me. Why you need, you know, I can be a good friend of Jonathan Agassi. I can go to the party. I can be there. I can talk to him. I can lift up the story about the father. I can do all the same element as a good friend. And I want something else. You can call it greedy. You can call it why you don't. Yeah, it's true. I want something else.
What do you want?
I want that that our choices in life won't be just for nothing. That is like target in life to go somewhere and to collect through life point and moment passion and whatever is it. Otherwise, it's like, what's the point? In a big picture, you ask me, then what's the point to go through life?
What justifies, Carrie, what justifies your action as a documentarian?
I keep saying, having the same answer. It depends. I mean, I also do investigative reporting. And so when you do broadcast investigative storytelling, there's an accountability piece of that, right? You're always wanting to know, you're following who's at fault for something. And so that's clear, and that's the goal of that. But when I make independent films, I'm interested just in the story. I mean, for many years when you're young and rebellious and you don't want to be labeled, I just wanted to be called a storyteller. I didn't want to be a filmmaker or a journalist or an artist or not. I just wanted to be a storyteller, and I'm always drawn to a story. And so sometimes it can be because it raises complex issues that you yourself are curious about. A lot of times, I totally agree with Tomer in that, if you go into something and you think you know what the story is, then I'm always skeptical of those filmmakers. And like Amit, I read about 1,000 proposals a year, on some level. And so I'm always interested in the things where the filmmaker's curious, where they're trying to understand a complicated either situation or system or matter of the human condition. And sometimes in my last film, we wanted to tell, it was an incredible story, but we also just wanted to make people feel good. We wanted people, to go into the theater, maybe having a bad day or just not being sure if they were going to care about this film, and then just coming out and feeling happy and having another set of emotions. And that was enough for us, just like to come in and just enjoy this piece, a kind of unexpected story, and then come out the other side and simply feel better or feel happy or just feel like something inspired you. To me, that was enough. I'm always driven by story, always, 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 even on the investigative side. I mean, I want to do good investigative reporting, but it has to have a really great and compelling story that we take people on a journey. That's what they're coming to us for, I think, at the core of it.
And Dan, maybe to add something that, again, now I'm very spontaneous. I was thinking about it, that now talking with two of you, I felt lucky that my first movie that was, I started shooting it 25 years ago, it's called in Hebrew, Tomer Vasotim, and in English, it kind of scared me. And lucky, I was said when two main school they told me, hey, you cannot study in our school, either it's a Tel Aviv University or some speaking. And I was depressed about it, and I was sad about it. I'm like, hey, why you not take me? So I went to work as a society leader, and then a year later, I took the camera and I created a movie. And while we are talking, I think I'm happy in perspective of time that basically I need to discover my own language and my own ethical ways. And it's good that no one gave me like a statement or teach me too much, which means I was not thinking about creating a movie, but at the end I felt was something was meaningful. I want to share this story with the world. And this is also a question that filmmakers need to ask themselves. We do it, we add something, I don't know if to say with beauty, but with this reason why you create the movie. It's very important, just because you got money, just because someone told you it's beautiful. So I felt with my first movie, again, I came with kind of autodidact and outsider to the field of documentary, and I just took this camera and I created. And now while I was talking with two of you, I felt, wow, probably it was completely different if I was with me, I was with background of something. So it's about discovering something. Just I wish to people to discover it.
I want to chip in another question that has been hanging for a while here. It says, did you ever feel that your protagonist projected what you as a person wanted to say, and you felt uncomfortable with it, so you didn't put it into your film?
The opposite. The opposite. It's one of the most strong moments when you feel that either someone talks that from your voice, or even someone give you not advice, but it's what, as you describe it right now, it's a very powerful moment that I wish to have more and more. You know what I mean? It's like it's not happening a lot while you're doing the movie. And it's a moment, the opposite, not to escape from it, to wish to have more from it, from my point of view.
But let me ask you again, because we have been really dangling here between the absolutist, or at least clear criterion which can or should guide us, and the relativist approach carry forwards here that every situation is susceptible to so many contingent factors. So how would you go about, Tomer, when someone wants you to put something inside and tells you, Tomer, put it in the film, and you just feel, no, I'm not comfortable, or let me be more rude with you, says, no, it doesn't serve my film. What's the criteria that should guide you?
It's always like this. Basically, it doesn't matter if you are very famous like Ohad Narin or you are anonymous like Paper Dolls. And it's also including me and you. We come with a package that we believe we are. We have our self-image. One of our jobs as a director is to destroy the image of the person, not from a negative way, but someone is wake up in the morning and convince him after many years, or even you are young or whatever, hey, this is me, this is who I am, this is my beliefs, and he give it to you. And a good movie and also a good director, his job is first of all to have it, bring it, say, and then slowly, in a smart way, and this is what also makes differences between directors. That's what's beautiful. One will go directly, put him on one frame and ask someone will, in my case, I like to start interview with very far about what I want to go, because I have time and I go for, I'm running for years. So, I might thinking about 3 months from now, I start and I kind of, I'm not manipulating, but I know that I'm asking questions I'm not really interesting to get some, but now I'm surprised that in my boring question, I discovered something and I forgot to go to my target. So it's also, Carrie and you're also dealing with as a filmmaker, and Dan, you made quite amazing movies. So I'm interested to hear from you, not only as a host and the ethical person, as a filmmaker, how you deal with it. What is your toolbox? Because I think it's a very big gift to the audience.
I think that my approach has changed through the years, but basically, I would leave out anything that my protagonists, as they were viewing the rough cuts, leave it out if they said I cannot handle it. I leave them the opportunity to say this I don't want, but I would try to struggle to leave in everything that they do not reject and not have a say on saying put this in rather than that. If you see that
them, you start to fight, you will work hard to convince them.
I never got into a conflict with my protagonist, and I don't know if I was right or not, but that is, I guess, my own very basic personality. I would fight with the commissioning editor. I would fight with the fund. I would fight with the channel. I would not fight with my protagonist. But I think that with Noid, because Noid was really leading the editing room, it was always be like, listen to what the character is not being able to really hold or contain and be able to leave it out, but not letting the protagonist say, put this in. You see, there's a difference between ruling what is in and allowing one the respect to leave something out. So we made that kind of a distinction between the two regimes, if you wish. But I want to come back, if it's okay with you, Tomer, and I want to hear your take on it, Carrie, as well, on one shot that really attracted my attention, and that is where you saw that injured man on taken from the street. He was really hurting. I don't think he was aware of the fact that he was being filmed. I think he was agonizing. He was half unconscious. He was struggling for his life. Now, what were you thinking when you decided to put this shot in? What was the process of thinking?
I was thinking today a lot about it while I was preparing to you. It's not my shot. I was not there with the protagonist. Giorgio from Paper Dolls was someone else with him. I asked myself today if I will do the same. I tried to connect to the Tomer like 15 years ago and to answer it from the point of view while I was doing the movie. I remember that was, I felt that too many people are suffering from the conflicts that we have here, and they even don't have any connection to this. You know what I mean? We are stupid, the Jewish Palestinian fight, killed, and in my case, I think our responsibility much bigger, but we can leave it right now. I just remember that I say, wow, Paper Doll's going to buy some costume for the show. You know, it's a kind of a area in south of Tel Aviv. That's the reason they went. Bomb, and many people were around. And then in the shot, while you see him, it was kind of reactions to the media that choose to make it very soft. The whole idea about people that was hurting while was bombs in Tel Aviv. In this case, I again repeat myself, it was either the African or even the Filipino that is in foreigner country, and they need to pay heavy price for this crazy conflict. So in some way, I want to say, look, this is a situation, and the media won't show it to you. Media will do it something that you to
contain, hold it.
Yeah, to contain, to have it. And I know what I say now today when I saw this guy, and you know what I mean? He was anyway in the media all over. This situation was all over, if you like many years ago. And I felt with the pain on the face of Giorgio in this, it might give a different point of view to this violence. I'm not sure I will put it like this today. In some way, I believe I will choose differently, because I felt what you're talking about.
So we have to wrap up, but I want to conclude with one question, and this question to each of you has a kind of short answer. Is the foundation of ethics, because ethics is not about what there is, but what we can hope for. Ethics is the field of humans where they project toward the future. So I want to ask each of you to say in few words, when you look into your future as documentarians, people who are living documentarianly, what do you hope for yourself? Not in terms of commercial, financial, technical, professional, et cetera, but in terms of what kind of future would you like to hope to live in or through as a documentarian? Obviously, as a human being who lives documentarianly. Who'd like to start? And then we'll say ciao ciao to our audience.
I would say shortly that I wish that it will have impact on life of people, and it might help in a very small way, in a very gentle and modest way. I wish that in the future my movie will add to the puzzle of the universal something that will be less evil and might help to some people for one day, for one moment, for whatever, to have a better, not better life, but better way of dealing with life. I wish for myself that my movies will belong to this part of the history.
Amen. Carrie, what's your take? What do you hope for?
Well, we're talking about this a lot at the IDA. I don't know that this is reverberating in Israel, but in the United States, the pandemic has had an enormous impact on our field. And already some of our institutions will not be able to survive the economic repercussions of this. So we learned just a few days ago that the Tribeca Film Institute, which supports documentary filmmakers, is closing down. And that's the first of what we believe will be, others to come. And so we are actively having a discussion about reimagining the future. And, there are, like so many things in our society, there are lots of systemic issues and inequities in the field. And as Tomer said, none of us do this to make money. We don't make money, most of us. And we're kind of hanging on by a thread. And what this pandemic showed is really how fragile our ecosystem is and how fragile our filmmakers are. And so what we hope is for a strengthened field, and that comes in a variety of ways, from helping filmmakers keep their books better so that they can get federal aid when it's available to them, but they have to have their books in order, to thinking about these bigger ethical questions, to thinking about where the power lies. Does it lie with the large streaming platforms, or does it lie with the independent storytellers who are creating all the work? And so I think we're really sitting back and thinking about these things, but in part it's difficult for us because we're right in the thick of it and we're not sure what the long-term repercussions look like. And so, but we think in rebuilding, this is what filmmakers are good at, is at imagining. And so I think there's an opportunity to kind of imagine a more equitable and stronger field.
All right, guys. So this is the end of this conversation. It's been a pleasure talking to you. I want to thank Kopro. I want to thank Amit Goren for introducing us. Tomer Heyman, thank you so much. Carrie Lozano, it's been a pleasure. Have a good night, all of you.